hotspots and internet free of charge to families who need it, along with Chromebooks to each student. The district must also work with IEP and special needs students to deliver instruction if online instruction would be an impediment to learning. The district should create plans for in-person or home-delivered instruction to our district's families who most need it. If not, the district will be harming these students and also be violating educational equity laws. This moment calls for a public health and safety approach to education, but also being creative to ensure that all students and families' educational needs are being met. Thank you. All righty. The fourth public comment that I have, hold on one second while I find it. Trying to read them in order. Nope, that's not it. Okay, let me get it. Yeah. Sarah Jones, received at 11:18 a.m. Governing board members, my name is Sarah Jones. As a parent of 3 PUSD students, I would like to ask you to consider the following before approving the action item. There are 5 items. Number 1, what is the definition of, quote, when health and safety conditions permit, unquote? Is there a plan based on positivity rate, on number of active cases in a certain region, or on when a vaccine is made available? I understand you cannot predict the future, but is 100% distance learning something you're hoping to end as soon as possible? Generally, any goals that are made should be, quote, measurable, unquote. How will you know if you have reached this goal of, quote, health and safety conditions permit, unquote, if there's no defined way to measure it? Number 2, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the National Academies of Sciences, Health, and Engineering have issued guidance recommending that schools reopen as soon as possible for in-person learning. I realize that there's much additional funding needed to make this happen. Why are you not putting the message out to the community about these needs and the importance of in-person learning? Parents can and will fight. They will write letters to the government. They can bring their children to marches or demonstrations, but instead the message coming from PUSD is, quote, it is too hard to make it work, so let's just give up, unquote. Number 3, have you considered pushing the start date of the school year back? This way there can potentially be more in-person days of school this year once schools are able to open back up. Number 4, if school is to start remotely, what can you offer to working parents of elementary school children? Can you give them a place to send students where they can learn remotely, but with aides or other staff available to assist? A principal could supervise, and teachers, aides, and other staff can monitor students, give them breaks, etc. Number 5, nearby school districts and private schools are continuing with plans to open for hybrid learning. This option needs to be put back on the table. There are empty campuses with many additional classrooms. There are TOSAs and administrators who can step in to teach and lower class sizes. Please think outside the box. Send the message to the community of teachers, staff, students, and parents that you consider our children's education essential and fight for the resources to get our kids back in school. Thank you for your time, consideration. All right, the 5th one that I have is from Allison Steps, received at 12:06, I believe. Yeah, 12:06 p.m. United Teachers of Pasadena's 900 members have participated in a special interest poll that asked the following question. Do you agree with UTP's executive board and bargaining team that Pasadena Unified School District should not physically reopen school campuses on August 17th, 2020? 90% of our unit members agreed that it is not time to physically reopen schools. Educators and children must teach and learn in conditions that are safe and healthy. The health and safety of our students and staff must take precedence when considering the physical reopening of school buildings. We know that students do their best when their health and safety are assured. Medical science and public health professionals must inform school districts on the conditions of health and safety necessary to reopen schools. Consequently, United Teachers of Pasadena believes that PUSD can best protect the health and safety of students and educators by not reopening schools to, quote, in-person teaching, unquote, on August 17th, 2020. Our immediate focus must become to partner with Pasadena Unified School District to get ready for delivering the highest quality distance learning program that we can consistently provide to ensure learning and equity to meet all our students' needs. Most recently, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health issued reopening protocols for K-12 schools that under particular conditions could permit the reopening of schools to in-person teaching. However, the prevailing conditions speak to the current spike in Los Angeles County of COVID-19 cases, increased number of hospitalizations, and increased number of deaths, thus making it too risky to endanger the lives of our students and employees by reopening schools. The Pasadena school community must regard students and educators who work at our sites as human beings whose lives are valued. Sixth public comment is Tina Fredericks, received at 12:09 p.m. To Superintendent Dr. McDonald, I'm submitting the below letter for public comment today. I'm a Tina Fredericks, PUSD parent, Willard and McKinley Middle. I'm a PUSD parent of 2 students at Willard and McKinley Middle. I appreciate the school board and leadership team are putting safety first in their decision-making process. What is the measurable criteria to conclude that schools are safe enough to reopen or safe enough to remain open? Please elaborate on, quote, with flexibility to operate a full in-person or hybrid model when health and safety conditions permit, unquote. What is the measurable criteria for, quote, when health and safety conditions permit, unquote? In the agenda, it says the LA County infection rate is 10% and WHO says 5% is safe. So are we saying once we drop to 5% is okay to reopen? How long do we have to maintain 5% or below? District says they're looking at the science and the data. Can you please share with us the math too? Let's avoid our schools going the way of the deadly result of LA County reopening without consequences for people not following safety protocols. We should not be doing the bare minimum. We should be raising our own district standards for safety. Regarding fiscal impact, the agenda states that COVID-19 expenses will be tracked and the district will be seeking revenue to pay for those expenses. Will securing the revenue be a criteria for reopening? Or according to UTP, essential conditions for reopening schools, the district expects teachers to provide their own face masks. Is that still the case? In response to UTP's request for the district to provide soap and paper towels for all sinks, the district said they would follow the California Department of Education guide for reopening schools. It states, quote, ensure sufficient supplies of hand sanitizers, soap, hand washing stations, tissues, no-touch trash cans, and paper towels, unquote. The question is, where is the funding to ensure sufficient supplies? What is considered, quote, sufficient, unquote? We need measurable criteria so that we do not compromise on safety and risk lives. I'm hearing parents saying that they will be taking their kids to private school because PUSD will only be offering 3 classes while private schools are offering an array of courses online. Parents need to be informed regularly, even daily, during the planning, not after decisions are made. Please provide this regular transparency. This will build trust and retain our families who are able to choose other schools. They need reinsurance that the district remains competitive with private schools. Understandably, parents don't want their child to fall behind, not graduating in time, and lower chances of getting into college. Parents need to know information in advance because they're making decisions now where to put their children next year. Parents need a reason to stay. Let's give them many. I believe I just have 2 more. Number 7. I shall find that one. Yeah, okay. Number 7 is from Lydia Breen, B-R-E-E-N, received at 12:33 p.m. Please respond to the following questions during the public session of PUSD's meeting today. Number one, going forward, how will you be more transparent in the lead up to schools reopening in the fall? Number two, I would like to see more precise markers before the decision is taken to physically reopen schools. What is the rate of transmission and duration of time? Number three, how do you plan to pay for the extra expense of keeping children, teachers, and staff safe? What efforts have you made to engage the community to assist with after-school childcare for working parents? And then finally, I believe, number 8 is from Maria Gonzalez. And this was received at 2:33 p.m. Good afternoon, board members. My name is Maria Gonzalez. I would like to start by saying that Washington Elementary, as many of our West Side schools, are one of our most at high-risk schools because most of our community is Latino and Black. Our Latino and Black communities are the workforce. Our parents are essential workers and don't have the option to stay home and have to work to provide for their families. Every day, these parents are at risk of infection, and now we're asking them to send their kids to school. Our West Side schools are less fortunate schools in which students depend on their daily meals, socialization, speech/emotional therapy, and academic support. Our parents don't have the privilege to work from home or to help their kids with their homework. Many of our parents only speak Spanish and rely on older children for translation. How can our high school students do their work if they're consistently having to help their younger siblings? Without mentioning that a lot of families share housing with numerous household members. This situation itself makes it very difficult for a student to learn when choosing an all-online schooling. Therefore, even though they are not comfortable with the idea of sending students back to school, that's what they see as their only option due to their language barrier, the environment at home, the lack of communication with teachers, and not having the time to supervise their children because they have to work. You tell me if these parents really have a choice when they are already on the short end of the stick. I don't think so. Many of our parents don't have internet access, and when they do, they don't know how to navigate the internet. Many of our parents are afraid of computers, many times fearing breaking the computers just by pressing keys. It might seem ridiculous, but it is a reality. I had many parents come to me to fill in their online survey because even though they had opened the link, they were afraid they would do it wrong. Many parents come to me because they have not updated their information and they never receive the link to the survey. I was glad the survey was sent via USPS, but really it made no difference to parents that have no internet, and only a link was provided, not an actual physical survey they could send back. I understand that we are in the 21st century and we expect everyone to be up to date with technology, but unfortunately that isn't the case for our school community. I'd be surprised if the response on the survey for my school is low. That probably means I wouldn't be surprised. It is not the lack of interest, it is a lack of knowledge and accessibility. Washington Elementary, Washington Middle, among other schools, will be one of the most affected because we lack effective communication and we lack proactivity. It is sad that PUSD is aware and chooses to ignore what the problem is when it comes to reaching out to parents. In order to serve our community, we need to understand the needs of the community to better serve them. Our East Side community is not the same as our West Side, and different measures need to be taken in order to serve them both effectively. PUSD has decided that they will reach out to all parents 100% online, while 100% will not reach our less fortunate communities. I can tell you that Sierra Madre parents will participate and will see 100% response 100% of the time because they have the time, the online knowledge, and the privilege to be able to work from home, provide their kids with the tools and assistance they need to be successful. Let's try to work and do more for the less privileged. Let's give our students the opportunity to be successful at home too. Let's think of those schools that are currently at most risk when funds are distributed. Now, I believe that if we educate and provide resources for parents, they will be able to be successful. Let's encourage parents to oversee the work of their children, but not to do the work for them. Make parents understand that if they do the work, they only harm the student in the long run. Let's invest in our schools to make them safe for those who choose to return. Provide sanitizer, masks, thermometers, portable hand washing stations, plexiglass protection, enough room for social distancing. The virus isn't going anywhere anytime soon, and we need to learn to live with it. And if we are asked to send our kids to school, let's send them to an environment that will not only keep them healthy, but will provide the best learning environment. I think that's 8.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Phelps. I will move on to action item H1. We have staff slides, looks like. Academics, Brian, are you going to present this, or is this coming from Dr. Blanco?
Dr. Blanco will present, but let me introduce the item. But before I introduce the item, I'd like to acknowledge our new associate superintendent of specialized support services, specialized student services, Marco Villegas. He will be formally introduced at our next board meeting on the 30th. So welcome, Marco.
Welcome,
Thank
Mark.
you very much. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah. So good afternoon, board. So needless to say, at our last meeting, we presented to you several models that we were considering as a part of the hybrid model of instruction for the 2020-2021 school year. And since that time, conditions have changed. Obviously, there has been a spike in the number of coronavirus cases. And also recently, the governor released an executive order mandating that all indoor operations of certain businesses be closed. And so it was very, very apparent to us that we needed to consider closing as well, given the difficulty in keeping our kids and staff safe as it relates to these conditions. And so this is not a decision that we take lightly. We have heard the concerns. These are concerns that frankly keep me awake at night. Moving to a fully online environment will mean that some families will have a difficult time in assisting their kids. Kids will have a difficult time continuing with their education. So we have discussed a lot of these concerns, and we will be presenting some of the models that we've been looking at and where we are with our plans. So again, this is not a decision that we've taken lightly. We have made every effort to hear from our parents and from our teachers and staff. As a matter of fact, the recent survey that we administered to try to ascertain the number of families that would be interested in a fully online environment, in addition to the hybrid model, we had a significant number of families participate. I think we had between 10 and 13,000 families respond to the survey. And of course, that's a high response rate. So we feel like we've been pretty responsive in terms of getting information out and hearing from our families and from our staff. And so this is a decision that we believe is best for all parties concerned, our students, our staff. And therefore, we will be formally recommending to the board that you approve the reopening of schools in a fully online environment. And prior to you doing that, I'll ask Dr. Blanco and the academics team to give you an update on where we are with our plans. Dr. Blanco?
Okay. Good evening, President Cahalan, board members, and community and public. I also would like to respond to some of the comments that were made about involving the community in our decision. We not only had one survey, we had 3 surveys. And the first survey we did was called the Pulse Survey. We took that data very seriously. We spent almost an entire principals meeting analyzing the data and looking for where there were gaps in the data for families that may not have responded at high rates at particular schools. Then we conducted an additional survey to see what type of model families would want, and studied the results of that survey, and then dialed it down to our last survey where we wanted to know who the individual families were by ID number, so that we could reach out to them and have additional conversations about what instruction would look like. So we are trying very hard to involve the community and be transparent. We held LCAP forums as well as community forums regarding the instructional models. So, we're certainly open to suggestions about how we can continue to gather input from our families. But we have made that a priority and have tried several different ways in addition to the superintendent's weekly communication. So I just wanted to start with that because it's really, heartbreaking when people think that we're not trying to involve them, because we really are. We care very much about the students and families that we serve. So just starting with the presentation, I'm going to do the introduction, and Mrs. Hill is going to talk a little bit more about the models, and Dr. Reynoso is also here, and we can answer any questions that you might have. So can I see the next slide, please? I don't know who's changing our slides. Okay. So due to the public health concerns, we are asking you, as Dr. McDonald mentioned, to consider allowing us to begin the year in a remote learning setting through a distance learning model. I would say it will be very different than the distance learning that we engaged in our emergency situation. There have been several questions about the metrics. Ria is our new health director. I think we're familiar with Mrs. Apodaca and her work here at PUSD for the last 25 years. She's in contact with Dr. Go. They are looking at what metrics are appropriate regarding time and conditions. So it was mentioned that 5% of the disease rate is suggested, from worldwide health organizations for reopening communities. And we will get more detailed metrics for what it means for Pasadena and Pasadena Unified as we're working through the daily cases and the hospital rates, and as well as unfortunate, death rates. So those things are all being considered. We're very fortunate to have our own health department and be able to, engage in these conversations weekly and mostly daily with our health department. So reevaluation will occur at, specified times in the first semester. We're ready to go, as we presented with an in-person model. We did go back based on public comment and board suggestions and have reworked some of those models. But then as the disease rate increased, we have come to agreement that this is probably the best way for us to go to keep everyone safe, at least while we begin the school year. So the next slide. So, the phase emergency remote learning is really what educators had to do in the spring of 2020. It was unplanned method of delivering instruction, and we saw that our teachers were certainly heroes, in PUSD and pretty much across the nation, to be able to switch gears and reach their students in a way that they had not been fully trained in, with curriculum that was not designed to be online. And we know that we want to do a more thorough job and be able to have more contact with our students than we had in the previous spring. So in preparation for the school year, our PUSD models for designed for learning are going to be very intentional with the delivery of remote instruction. So our families will see a difference. Our educators will be more prepared, because we're going to provide training on how to be an online teacher, and we have time to do this before school starts. We all also switched learning platforms. There were a lot of questions about how will we monitor and what will we see in terms of engagement. Our other systems simply didn't have the capabilities to do all of those things. And we're going to do this with the intent to support our teachers, right? It's not a got you type of situation. We really want to help everyone be successful and know which students need additional support and who are not accessing their education. So we will be able to do a much better job through the Canvas learning platform. So next slide. So the systems that we have are Canvas, which I just mentioned. We have trained a good number of the teachers over the summer, and we have training planned for the beginning of the school year and throughout the school year. And that is our new learning management system. And parents will also have accounts. So parents will be able to see, their students' engagement. That was not possible with our other system. WebEx is a more robust video conferencing tool, for a live classroom environment with more protections than some of the tools that we had. Going into somebody's home is very personal for the teacher side and for the student side. So we had to work through some things and create situations where everyone feels safe and protected. So our structures, there are going to be more daily schedules for students and teachers with increased live interaction. We heard that loud and clear from our families that they want to be able to have contact with their teachers on a more regular basis. And then there are two legislative bills that recently passed, AB 77 and SB 98, that have some universal requirements for California, where before every district was trying to figure out, how to do this on their own. So now we have some guidance, and the guidance does really suggest that in-person learning is what is best for students. And I think we all agree that that is true, but we want to be able to make sure that we are, keeping our employees and the students safe. And there has to be a certain level of, control for the disease in order for us to do that. So instructional resources, we have content developed. It's designed in alignment with best practices for online instruction. We've been working very closely with a university to be able to have tools to help our teachers be online instructors. And that's one of the major differences in our professional development that we're going to have for this upcoming school year. And many colleges have been online for a long time, so they have experience and what it takes to be an online teacher and what are some of the tools you need in your toolbox to be successful. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Hill to talk about the differences between, the hybrid model and the online model, because there are some really succinct differences that we had planned prior to us all going back into the remote learning stage.
Thank you, Dr. Blanco. Before I begin, I do want to give credit where credit is due for the information that I'm about to share. Dr. Blanco, Dr. Reynoso, under their guidance, Nadira Nayo and Harmony Kano and myself, in a collaboration of CIPD and EdTech, were able to bring some information together that we hope will provide clarity for folks. What you're seeing obviously has to be a very deep and connected partnership between ITS and the academics divisions, and of course our health and safety and school supports divisions. There is a lot that is still what we call moving parts, and as every daily change occurs, we want to make sure that we give you what is accurate. So what I want to be able to provide for you today is sort of the terminology and status of where our learning models are, given the shift to this proposed beginning in remote learning. So what I wanted to sort of provide a distinction on first.
Helen, can I interrupt for 1 second? We have a couple of extra mics on, so we're getting cross-talking. Everybody check their mics, please. Go ahead, Helen.
Okay, no problem. Thank you, Pat, or Board President. So I apologize. So the distinction here, you've heard this term remote learning throughout the introduction that Dr. Blanco provided. Remote learning is really referring to the setting, the environment in which the students find themselves. Remote learning is a response to school closure. Versus what I'm about to go into, which are the learning models. The learning models refer to the method of instructional delivery, and the structure in which students are learning. So everyone will be in a remote learning environment, but they will still be in one of these two selected models. So we will actually tie up sort of in the next few slides also what a distinction between remote learning and online learning is, because those words are being frequently used. And yes, in a general sense, they are synonymous, but I want to make clear that the way that we're using the language in PUSD will have some distinctions. And so I just want to make sure the community gets that kind of clarification. So first, I wanted to share that being attentive to this terminology, this is unchanged from what Dr. Reynoso presented actually at our last meeting, even though it seems that the world has turned upside down since then. We are still looking at the hybrid models with the structures that were proposed earlier in the summer. So what we saw at the end of June at the board meeting is still what is being described here in the hybrid model, that there were different structures and schedules proposed for elementary, middle school, and high school. The online model is what was introduced by Chief Jamal, but we did not have details at that time for you, and we do now. So we'll go ahead and share with you that these are defining terms for hybrid. Essentially, hybrid is that structure where students attend school with a combination of in-person and distance. Obviously, with us starting in a remote setting, we won't be coming in person. However, families that select a hybrid model, like myself, for my children in PUSD, would actually be able to return in person once those health guidelines permit us to. I know there's been a lot of conversation around what criteria are we using. We are going to have a phased timeline. I have spoken with Director Apodaca around what the check-ins will look like, and that criteria is being built. So once we are cleared for safety, we would expect that students would be able to return in person. Versus the online model. The online model is our structure of learning where students attend school entirely in an online environment. They will still remain enrolled at their current school. No changes in any of that or the permitting. However, this does provide that year-long expectation of being in an online environment. All right. Now, this is a great image of the comparison of what happens in either of these two models. So if you've used a Venn diagram before, you'll know that the items on the left and the far left and the far right are exclusive to that model, and the items in the center, in the yellow here, are items that are appear in both models. So I'll start first with the hybrid model. The hybrid model does utilize the core, the district core adoptions, but additionally some model units that are being developed by CIPD and EdTech specialists, and of course PUSD teachers. A lot of these teacher leaders would include our instructional coaches and our tech leader innovators, but also some classroom teachers that have been working with us in this vein. The reason why we speak specifically about model units, you've heard about some of the adaptations that we've done to the scope and sequences in the PUSD curriculum. Those obviously still stand in both models, but what we're really talking about is utilizing lessons and activities that are created for an online environment, rather than asking our teachers to transition content that was traditionally done in person and try to manage the conversion into an online setting. We are going to be able to provide tools for that in these model units. The instructional delivery, of course, is with PUSD teachers, but because it is the hybrid model, we will continue to follow the cohort schedule that you saw in the earlier proposal by Dr. Reynoso, but they're, of course, going to be adjusted during remote learning. This is coordinated primarily at the site with district support, which leads into the final bullet point, because direct supports for special programs can still be had in the hybrid model. Magnet themes that may occur at that school site, dual language, GATE, AP, IB, those are much more directly supported in the hybrid model as it is site-based. Now I'm going to move over to the online model, and then I'll talk about the similarities. The online model will use a pre-built online program. This is a instructional resource that Dr. Blanco referred to earlier that has some overlap with the hybrid model in the sense that we are we are providing for teachers and students content that works best in an online environment. But they will have access to units that are directly created to stay in an online environment throughout the year. In general, can explain that a lot of it is project-based. It is something that is more facile and flexible when you are remote. There will be daily live instruction, again, delivered by PUSD teachers. However, this one is potentially a longer-term commitment. Choosing this over the hybrid model means that you're likely looking at an online setting for your student for the entire year. Currently, it is offered for K-12. We are looking to see if we can customize it for TK, but that is not guaranteed yet. And the same with the final bullet point is that there are possible supports. They're in development for special programs that I listed in the hybrid side. And we definitely know that there is a need. We are trying to address it. But again, we do not have confirmation of that for you right now. And finally, let me talk about the similarities. There will be supports for English language learners and students receiving special education services in both models. We do not want either of these models to be prohibitive to students. They are all going to use our standards-based curriculum, NCAA and UC A through G approved, and there will be access to content that is native to online teaching so that it is a better support for students and teachers and not a rendering of something that was traditionally done in person. Finally, the foundational piece to all of this is at the bottom, which is that you can see that we are going to work with students and families to ensure equity and access to quality instruction. You'll see the list there of accommodations that we will be taking into consideration and supporting. I know that our ITS division is also working on technological access. So those things all still remain true because in a remote setting, we will need to engage that for both learning models. Okay, so the next question that we get, that this would lead us to is, then what is the difference between remote learning and the online model? So as I referred to earlier when I began, remote learning really speaks to that setting, the environment where we find ourselves having to be at a stay-at-home order, and schools closed because of the public health guidelines. But we can still guarantee instructional continuity for students. So we would consider everyone in the hybrid model as being remote hybrid at this point in time if we are able to proceed with a remote learning environment at the start of the school year. The online model speaks to the alternative to having to return in person at any time. It means that you will persist in this online setting for the duration of the school year. It is intended, like I said, for the school year, but of course, individual needs will be taken into consideration. But we do have a recommendation that occurs at natural breaks in the school year, such as the semester. Again, we really want to create a stable environment for students in very unstable times. And so that's why we are putting forth such distinctions in the programs. Finally, I wanted to share with you a sample schedule. We watermark this because, again, this is not what we are putting out for all programs and models. We do still need to have the structures for hybrid confirmed, and I believe that is happening at the next board meeting. And we, at that time, will be producing the schedules for both models, hybrid and online, across each grade span. But I wanted to give you a sample of what this would look like because one of the biggest concerns that both teachers and students had were sort of the unstructured time that happened in the emergency remote learning in the spring. Moving into this school year, we've had more preparation time. We've had lots of lessons learned. And two of our biggest driving factors has been how do we help students be successful? How do we help teachers be successful? I would not, it's an understatement to say that our teachers and our students have taken on a huge load of learning in how to be in this setting. And so as many structures and as many tools and resources as we can provide is what we would encourage. So the schedule here would show that we have an increased amount of live synchronous time. You'll see that in the yellow sections. In the blue as well, that is learning time that is noted, but for the specials, for the arts, for even clubs, that's not on this schedule, but it can be incorporated. So we did block out, if you'll notice, that Monday, which in the proposal that you saw back in June, that day is reserved for significant amount of planning and professional development that will be required. But there will be some live learning happening on that day. I understand in each of those proposals. So we will just make sure that schedules that work for each grade span and for each model will be provided so that families as well as teachers have some stability and assurance of what is able to happen. All right, I think that is the end of that presentation, so I will hand it back to Dr. Blanco.
We're ready for questions.
Mr. Cahalan.
Who would like to go first?
I would
I
like
heard,
to.
I heard Elizabeth.
All right, Elizabeth, fire away.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. One of the emails we received talked about a separate school remote option in which students would not enroll at their regular school, but would be in some kind of other option. It's like a pool of learning in some way. Is that something that you are considering?
So at our last presentation, Chief Jamel talked about the online school and the vision the district has for an online school, but we were planning to use this year to plan and open up that option in 21-22. We were offering similar kind of like a test of the option at individual schools. And I think even the initial conversation brought up a lot of concerns from the community about losing their space at a school. What if they didn't really, like that model? If they tried it, would they be able to return? So we decided to go with a softer rollout pilot, still be able to offer the option of online with a specialized curriculum, but students would remain enrolled in their school. And Chief Jamel might want to add additional comments.
Oh, well, sorry about my phone ringing. Let's see. But you are contemplating that for the coming year, there will be some students who are not in any school. They are just floating in some kind of general remote instruction.
No, they will be enrolled in their own school. Go ahead, TJ, sorry.
No, I was going to say you pretty much said it all already. The students would still be enrolled in their home school currently. For the ones that do attend the 100% online program, they would just be attending a different program, but under their same titled school this year.
Oh, I see. Well, I think I see. And then my other question, why is it necessary to have a full year commitment if we do go to all online and not opening our campuses? Why do we not have the option to, in mid-year, go back to a hybrid model?
So the design for an online school is really, sometimes a specialized student that needs that kind of schooling, almost like independent study, CIS. And it's something Dr. McDonald has had a vision for a long time, maybe to capture some homeschool parents and special circumstances. So as we started working on it, we realized that if we allowed people to jump back and forth, that we wouldn't be able to predict our staffing. So if our teachers were hired to be or committed to being online only, and then a great number of the students wanted to come back to be in person, that it would be difficult to staff, but there will be, of course, exceptions made. You know, every rule has an exception based on individual student and family needs, but we would like that commitment so we could have a true pilot and see how it works.
Well, actually, I'm not talking about the pilot. I'm talking about the whole rank and file of all of our students. If we vote that the campuses will not open, does that mean that they can never open anytime during the year?
Oh, no, we're asking you this evening to have permission to be able to go into the hybrid or full in-person operation, to give us the flexibility when the health conditions permit. So, for instance, we're asking the families, which their choice may change now, to make a choice to be hybrid or to be online so we can plan staffing accordingly. But everybody is beginning online because of the health and safety conditions. But if somebody says, I want to be a hybrid, like Mrs. Hill said that she would like her children to come hybrid, when we're able to open, then her children would come to school. The parents who selected online, then they would remain online. So, we have to have some idea of what families are choosing, because we, base staffing and our purchases of materials and, space in the classrooms upon their choices.
Dr. Pomeroy,
Yes, just one more question, so I'll be sure to understand. I heard that with one family or member of the family, a parent, didn't want to choose that, yes, they would accept having the online version this year, because if so, then when campuses reopened, they wouldn't be able to go. But that was a misunderstanding, is it not? Because our campuses either will be open or they won't be open. Is that right?
They will be open, but we're trying to plan for both choices, because we did have some families in our first survey say that they didn't want to return for health and safety reasons. So we're trying to give them a choice so we can meet the needs of, all of the families. But then there is staffing and planning involved. So we're hoping and encouraging that if you select the online, that you would stay with it for the year. Now, with that said, there is exceptions, right? There might be a reason why somebody needs to come back to hybrid. So I don't want to say it's a hard and fast rule, but there's a lot of planning that goes involved in both models and staffing choices. So we're hoping that, everybody's going to be at home right now because of health and safety. So the hybrid group, what they're saying is we want to come back when we're able to come back. And the online group is saying, for this year, I want to stay online for whatever reason, personal
Yes.
reason they have.
I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Phelps, you're unmuted. You want to go next?
Sure. I just want to say that I'm still impressed with the team and the thoughtfulness. And I do trust the team. I want to say that explicitly, to plan and adapt and communicate with the board. I don't, and one of the reasons, Mr. President, why we do public comment first, of course, is to incorporate, as board members, we're sort of the buffer, to incorporate the public comments into our questions. So I will attempt to do so. I don't agree with the public comment that, and my colleagues on the board know this already, it's not a surprise, that planning should be done in public and communicated at all steps at every step of the planning to the public. I don't think that's workable or viable or a good idea. I do trust the staff. I think the plans have been very thoughtful. I'm very impressed in both this meeting and the previous meetings. So I want to say that out at the outset. There was a comment about other districts are opening in hybrid and adjacent, I think it said, I'm not sure. Anyway, there was a comment adjacent or other nearby or something, other districts are opening in hybrid. And I just want to point out that we all received, not for public comment, but the board received a letter from our union, teachers union president, Dr. Allison Steps, but it was signed not just by her, but by the La Cañada Teachers Association president, the Glendora Teachers Association president, the Alhambra Teachers Association president, the Glendale Teachers Association president, the San Marino Teachers Association president, the Hacienda La Puente Teachers Association president, the Mountain View Teachers Association president, the South Pasadena Teachers Association president, the Garvey Education Association president, the Duarte Unified Education Association president, the Azusa Education Association president, the Arcadia Teachers Association president, and the Temple City Education Association president. I don't know how many that was, but all of those people and the teachers they represent would like us to open in the manner requested today by the superintendent. And of course, it's well known that Los Angeles Unified and San Diego, big ones, and sure, there might be one somewhere, and certainly Orange County is another universe, maybe is a good word. But we know that. And I just want to read a passage from the letter from these union presidents. It's just one sentence. With the steadily increasing COVID-19 cases in the last 30 days, our members are anxious and fearful for the welfare of the children, for themselves, and for their loved ones. And I'm reading that because I feel that is the reason we are here today. Okay. I can, quibble about the science and talk about, which Dr. Reynoso pointed out previously that you guys have looked around the world actually at, other models, and how I'm aware of how countries were able to open. They didn't necessarily call them cohorts. Some of them called them capsules or little groups of students successfully without increasing the spread. But that was when the community transmission level was quite low. And I think that, as I was talking to Dr. Pomeroy the other day, I think that's an important distinction. We don't have a low transmission rate, as far as I read, So I think that's why we're here today. The question that this is to see if I understand what staff is saying. There are some commenters that want more specific, measurable parameters, criteria, Dr. McDonald and Dr. Blanco. You heard those? Some of them even knew that the county said 5%, right? And so my response, I guess I would say, our newly crowned health director, Ms. Apodaca, and this excellent team would be in touch with the county and would make the decision based on the advice of the experts, as they've always done. And I think that statement is, some of these statements are underlying them saying we don't trust the district. Well, I disagree. I haven't seen any evidence that I can't trust this team. And I am a buffer between the community and you all in my role. So I want to be clear, Brian. Sorry, Dr. McDonald, Mr. Superintendent. And I'm glad that Dr. Pomeroy brought this out of the comments. What we are being asked to approve, and I'll read it from the board report, is it is proposed that both models are approved, the models that you've just heard, and staff is given the flexibility to decide when it is appropriate for each model to be in operation. At the start of the 2021 school year, both models will operate in a remote setting. A phased timeline for any transitions back to a full in-person or the hybrid model will be communicated to the community in advance. I understand that some people want to know when that is. I'm okay with you all talking with the health experts and communicating with us, right? As Brian and his team are very collaborative, as you can see with us. But I want to be clear, Mr. Superintendent and Chief Academic Officer. So you're asking that both models be approved, and you have the flexibility, right, to tell us when you're going to implement, I guess, hybrid, right? Implement hybrid in an in-person setting and continue. Sorry, I'm going to get the words wrong, Helen. Continue online learning with the people who are not comfortable, right? Returning. Is that true, Dr. McDonald? You like that approval today?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Phelps.
So in this way, it's a little bit, Mr. President, I see this as a little bit like what you have thought about preparing, right? Some delineated delineation of authority, right? Because he's saying specifically what he wants.
Correct.
Right? Okay. So now my question for the Chief of Human Resources, Dr. Miller, and Helen, and I think they know what's coming. I heard the praises, and I consistently hear the praises from you all about the people that adapted, both teachers and others, during the spring. Unfortunately, I also heard from parents who were not satisfied with the level, let's say, of engagement from their child's teacher. So included in your presentation is daily direct instruction, I believe. So I'm wondering how that's monitored, Dr. Miller, whether there's some need to have an agreement with the teachers, whether the principal is going to monitor it, I don't know. And then my other question, sir, which is about this AB 77 requirement for a weekly engagement record for each student. So I know you're in the process of figuring it out, but I wonder how that would be implemented. So those are my questions.
Dr. Miller was having some technology problems because he had texted me earlier. So I think he was trying to get back in by phone. But what I will say is that Canvas gives us the ability to do exactly what you're asking for. And we will have to have conversations with our labor partners about what that means. I think I will also go back to the root cause of some of the reasons people may not have been able to engage was their own internet access. Even when some teachers tried to purchase internet access, the companies wouldn't come out and install it, right? And they had to wait. There were, some areas that don't have as good of access. So I think, we really gave people the benefit of the doubt and want to help them be successful. And that's still our approach. But there are going to be, higher and greater expectations from the community. And I think we all realize that, and we want to rise to the occasion, right? I think every teacher wants to do the best job they possibly can. So a lot of those issues have been worked through. And the materials that we had or have were not designed to be 100% online materials. We've kind of approach that and have some new materials coming in, and we have professional development to help instructors be better online instructors that's going to occur for every teacher. So with all of those things in place, I think people have a greater chance of, being successful if they were not successful in the spring. And that there's many reasons why students could not engage, and not every teacher could engage at the same level. So I think you'll see a big difference. Mrs. Hill, you could add, or Dr. Reynoso, if you like.
Scott, can you hear me now? Sorry.
Oh, Steve said
Yes.
okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay, I apologize for that. Having some technical as exactly what Dr. regarding the way that we're doing the online program that we've been having, and that's a conversation that will be part of the next round of negotiations. And some of those concerns will be brought out there, and then how do we address that? Secondly, in terms of how we are going to track attendance and, more importantly, student engagement, as I had a conversation with Mr. Jamal just before we came on to this meeting, we can track that through Canvas. However, reporting will be done through Aries. And as you had said, we're currently still working that piece out. And so, as you had also said earlier, more than likely that will require right now a physical transfer of information or manual transfer of information from Canvas to Aries until we may be able to find a patch. But I would leave that to Mr. Jamal to answer.
I would also, good afternoon, everybody. Happy summer.
Hey,
So
was there 3 kids on your icon?
those are my 3 kids. Yeah, they're just not their faces. They're holding hands because they're happy.
That was beautiful. Okay.
Right? Yeah. No, we're keeping it real over here in the Reynoso
Okay.
household. I too am a big proponent of wanting to support the hybrid model, but also recognize that the online learning option is valuable for those families who might not just be afforded the opportunity or privilege, as I heard mentioned in the public comment, but there are other reasons why people are choosing the online for their families. And I want to just point that out, that is an admirable position that we're able to put families in if they need to do that to keep their family safe or whatever that reason is. So I'm really grateful that we're able to come to you tonight to do that. But to answer your question about the accountability piece as well, sorry, my dog wants to play with the phone, is that we also have asked all of our leadership to take part in all of the professional development with Canvas, that they also are building their own courses for there to be a platform in which our families and students and community can engage with also. I think it's important that they're learners in this, so they'll know how to support their staff in this situation. They'll know what to expect because we're expecting that of them. So, and many of us are also doing the exact same thing. We have to be learners in this transition of this time. And it's a really powerful tool that we'll have. So there's many layers to that. And I look forward to how our teachers will be supported through this transition.
Thank you. Is there, you heard this in one of the public comments, and it's not a new concern. Are there any additional plans to increase internet access for certain families? Or not just internet access, but internet and device, I guess? Maybe everybody has devices, I don't know.
So that's something we're continuing to review and have conversations around. We're looking at obtaining additional devices for new and incoming students, but we know going into this new school year, we will have a new intake of students as well as some staff members that may need additional assistance with that. So those are conversations and things that we're planning for as well.
Would, Dr. Reynoso, would principals be aware of which families do not have access? I'm speaking, there was a comment from Washington but I think it applies more broadly to certain areas.
Definitely. Well, one of the immediate reactions that we had was really being sure that our principals and identified staff were all hands on deck. We not only kept track of that on a daily basis, we were able to monitor which schools were in a position that still needed our assistance. Dr. Blanco and Chief Jamal worked hand in hand in making sure that we were able to purchase that. Chief Jamal also was able to use that document to create that curbside hub. So there was immediate access for families. We even turned it around so that when the principals weren't able to be on campus and not able to provide that kind of hands-on delivery, if you will, his team was able to take over. But nonetheless, our principals were doing everything they could and have kept a really watchful eye. And, their hands were in a position to do as much as they possibly could. Chief Jamal created a lot of pathways for us to be able to turn in work orders, and they were incredibly responsive. And so we saw the numbers, decrease significantly on a daily basis.
The numbers
of just people who needed access, whether it was a new device or they were needing troubleshooting, or can I exchange out my charger, or my hotspot's not working, what do I do? I mean, there was a multitude of things that were going on that we were able to track daily.
So am I hearing, Dr. McDonald, is it a global measurement, like when we do Canvas and we do engagement monitoring, we will measure that somehow? Like, how many students are not plugged in? This is what I heard, is that we would have a better measurement with Canvas.
Yeah, I do believe so. I think it gives us the opportunity to better measure student engagement and, of course, gauge the interactions between teachers and students.
And that would be a way to target additional outreach or resources?
Yes.
Because some of our colleagues who aren't on the call would ask you what was done, right? What was done for this family? What was,
Well, during the spring, when we went to a remote environment and we were using PowerSchool as our learning management system, we were able to determine the number of students that weren't logging on. We use that as a proxy for attendance and participation. And we were able to utilize, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Blanco, we were able to use chasers from LearningWorks to visit some of the families. But certainly we made an effort to reach out to these families to try to determine why the students weren't logging on. So we were tracking that. I think Canvas will give us the opportunity to dial in a little bit more.
So you have a baseline, is what you would say?
Yes.
You have a baseline measurement from the spring?
We do.
Or baseline, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President, indulging me. I just have a couple more questions.
Go ahead.
Dr. McDonald, there was a question that I believe you're aware of, or certainly a member of your staff is aware of. The question from the public was, what have you done to engage with community? I guess it means partners around childcare. And so I don't know how if you want to have somebody else answer that.
I can answer it.
And Dr. McDonald, also, if you need me to, I'm on.
Go ahead, Dr. Miller. I can chime in after.
Sure. So I can share that we have met with the area preschool directors, both here in Pasadena, Altadena, and Eagle Rock and South Pasadena. And under the guidance of Reed Hudson, we are looking at developing a matrix, which will begin to show where are the holes in terms of where our needs for our elementary, preschool and elementary students in terms of childcare during the regular day. In addition to reaching out to this group, Also, Maria Tolliver is leading a group that is
Maria
reaching out to
Tolliver, for the public, the Maria Tolliver is,
our director of our Learns program.
okay.
Yep, got it. Good job.
Yeah.
Thank you, Scott.
Uh-huh.
And Maria Tolliver is heading up a meeting of some of our partners, and that includes the city and the Boys and Girls Club, and also how they can assist in picking up some of our students if parents need additional coverage. And then also, I know that Dr. Blanco is working with Ree Hudson and looking at a structure. If we were to provide childcare ourselves, what would that look like? And then what would the additional costs be for that program? So there are different tiers that are going on at the same time.
Thank you. Real quickly, I think that the question about money, I don't believe Dr. Barnes is on the call. I didn't see her on the list. I hope she's doing okay. But Dr. McDonald, is the answer to the question, because in the board report it says $3.2 million is an estimate at the end of the board report. I believe it says, here, I'll read it. It says, approximate cost for technology, digital instructional content, student support, and professional development is $3.2 million. Of course, the questions that we got were about how to pay for that, but I believe the answer is there is funding. I'm not sure if it's all under the CARES Act or what, flowing to the state. What would be the answer? Is there
Yeah, there is funding. I think there is actually a $15 million set aside.
Okay. So there is funding. I wanted to tell the public that. Okay. Go ahead.
Yes, there is funding.
Okay. For our needs.
Although to be clear,
yeah,
the total level of funding that we will receive in this fiscal year will be less than what we received last school year, given the fact that we're not receiving the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, which is, I think it's estimated to be $5 to $7 million. So, but nonetheless, there is funds. There's a set aside for.
So there's is that true? There's funds for this, for learning loss and for opening, maybe.
Correct. Yes.
Of course, there could be another bill passed, as we know. Mr. Cahalan probably is following that. Could be another bill passed by the end of the month or so at the federal level. But that you're saying that's separate from the workload budget base kind of thing.
Yes.
That we're getting a hit on. Yeah.
Right.
My last question, I don't know if it's Dr. or Mr. Villegas. Marco?
Doctor.
Doctor. I don't know if he's still there.
I am. I'm still here. Yes.
So I'm curious about how, just some general principles or general approaches as to how you serve students with special needs in this environment. Just sort of a broad question, and you have to cram all that into like 10 seconds. No, I'm kidding, but go ahead.
One of the things that we were fortunate in SPED is having the opportunity to do the ESY, and during the ESY time.
And that is extended summer school?
Yes, extended summer school, extended year program for the special education student. And so in that, there was use of Canvas, and it showed with the students. So we feel much better, more equipped with students with special needs. Also, looking at special needs that weren't able to act.
I think I'm sorry.
Steve, can you mute your mic, Steve?
Steve, you got feedback.
Dr. Miller.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was just adding, additionally, the use of our instructional aids that we weren't able to access during the spring to help them be part of the equation of helping engage students by getting technology for them and giving them the training that they need in order to support instruction as well on the online basis. So I think when I'm speaking with the department, they feel very confident that with the time that they had with the extended session for the summer, we were able to learn a few things that are really going to help in the implementation of this fall's program. along with Canvas. Also, we're looking at other options, what other local entities are doing as well, and trying to get the best ideas to make sure that we meet the needs. One of the things that we're doing also is we're serving our community, serving the special ed community. The survey that's going out, that's going to identify some feedback, and we're going to really take that feedback to help identify how we can better support the instructional program. And so one of the questions that we'll be asking is, what could we do to better support our students and the parents that are helping with the instruction?
Thank you. I
Right.
withdraw, Mr. Cahalan.
All righty. Ms. Bailey, do you have questions, comments, concerns?
Yes, I do. I just want to know, thank you guys, first of all, for all of your work. This is really good work. But I have a couple of questions that have also come to me. How are we supporting the homeless students? Am I, you guys there?
Sorry. I was waiting to see if Dr. Miller wanted to respond since he works with Eric through that program. So I know that Dr. Sakian has been working with the staff in that department, reaching out to the families, working with Collaborate Pasadena, and giving extra attention and support, in terms of family, medical and food and supply needs. In terms of education, we have been serving them through the same ways that we've been serving the other students. So they have, some of the students have required in families a lot more support. So we've really been working closely with the community to address the other additional supports.
So is there a meeting place where they go because they're homeless? I mean, what facility are they using to meet in?
Well, the definition of homelessness is pretty broad. In some cases, it could be families that are sleeping on somebody else's couch or whatever the case may be. So, what we're doing right now is we're working very closely with our community partners to try to figure out what the needs of these families are. For example, Pactel, is a partner that we work with very closely, and they have they're very attuned to what's going on in the community with especially this group of students. And then of course our Families in Transitions office, they case manage a lot of the families with need, especially the homeless families. So they're providing as much support as they can. Dr. Miller and Dr. Sahakian, I think, are better able to provide more, additional details on what we would be doing to further support our homeless families.
Okay.
Just to add to that,
Dr.
remote
Miller.
education.
Sure.
I would say, just to add to that, I know we've worked closely with Eric and his team, as well as they've identified students that needed additional supports with internet access or other technology needs. We've definitely added them to our priority list to get things distributed to them, and then have also given them services directly through our curbside support, as well as support any issues or problems that they may have been occurring as far as access.
It's like Dr. Miller joined. Am I right? I don't know if he heard the question. Dr. Miller.
It looks like he fell off again.
Ms. Bailey, what we can do is we can ask Dr. Sahakian to provide you with a more detailed answer to your question.
Yeah, it's coming from the community. I mean, the community is interested in, I know the planning and everything that goes into it, but the best made plan can change, at the blink of an eye. So I understand that, but they still want to know that everyone is included, and we need to make sure of that as well. So when you presented your plan, you did a great job laying everything out, but there were some things that I guess you didn't, either this wasn't the time, you thought not to go into more detail with specifics on, you know, how we support homeless students and the students that are in foster care, things like what is going to be the turnaround for complaints with technology, what those expectations are, when is the community or the families going to get information on those types of planning and you know, learning how to deal with it. Also, with the kinder parents, I saw that they were on the plan, but how are the parents going to know how to support their kindergartner, and when will they find that out if they're on the distance learning master plan there? And then there's the scheduling. You know, what does the scheduling look like? Are all grades going to be online at the same time? Is there a breakdown of how you're doing middle school versus high school and elementary? So just those kind of things, I believe the community wants to know those types of plans. And then what the set curriculum and what that
Ms.
is
Bailey?
like per grade. Yes.
I apologize.
That's
My technology tonight. Now I can sympathize when folks share their technology woes. I apologize. But I did want to share with you that the Family in Transition has been tracking our homeless and actually making individual phone calls. We began doing that to ensure, number one, that they were aware of and were accessing our food serving mobile units. In addition to that, we are tracking our homeless around attendance, and then looking at ways we can use some of service intentions. Much of the same work is being done for our foster youth and tracking our foster youth. And one of the things we'll be talking about in an upcoming meeting is going to be how to identify those students that we lost over the last 3 months of school, and of those, who were the foster youth and who were the homeless, and then what are the things we need to do to catch them up. So I did want to assure you that there is work going on with our homeless and our foster youth.
Okay, thank you. And then my last and final question, I think, is regarding the students that are struggling. How are we going to get the extra supports to them that they need, especially because the expectation is that they're going to fall further behind in this environment? So how are we going to support them? And what's the plan for that?
So we have interventions that are built into much of the curriculum that we use. And as we were going back and looking at the request from the board to add a longer day, one of the areas that we looked at, if we could still only offer the 3 classes and have students be successful and not have to have so many classes online at the same time, we could extend the day and have a period that could be used for interventions. You know, that was one way we were looking at it in the secondary. And then in the elementary, you know, also working with Learns and the community partners that would have students after school to be making sure, or childcare. We're looking at learning pods and childcare, and we're going to have someone come and explain to us how that might work, how another nearby district has designed that. So it's not a lack of materials that we have and resources, because we do have the materials and resources to provide interventions. It's fitting them into the school day and, you know, making sure that people who support students outside of the school day have access to the resources and training. So there's going to be, we know, some, you know, summer slippage, which happens every year that teachers are used to working on, but then there's going to be some curriculum that was not addressed due to the situation. And Helen and her team, which I see Helen coming back on, can talk about this a little probably more clearly than I'm saying it, and what they've done in order to address standards that students need.
Before Helen speaks out, will the instructional aids be used at all as part of the intervention that will happen for students?
Hold
Yeah.
on, Michelle. Steve, you got to mute your phone. You're getting crosstalk again. And Dr. Blanco, you're cross-talking too.
Okay, so we are planning to make sure that the aides are equipped with technology. We discussed that in ELT today so that they can provide support. And I know that Dr. Miller has been in conversations with CSEA and that they are really willing to have people maybe work out of class per se and do some extra or additional things that they might not have done in their job description to support students. So the answer to that is yes. So I'll let Mrs. Hill speak now about some of the interventions and ways that we're going to look at catch up.
Sure. I really appreciate these questions, Ms. Bailey, because that's actually the heart of what we're most worried about. With all of the changes, the students who had the most significant amount of unfinished learning are those that we are really eager to, as the word is, diagnose in assessment, and make sure that we have a customized solution for them. So there's two things that I kind of wanted to speak to here, and again, I have to say that none of these things are perfect magic bullets that will resolve everything for everyone. But there are things that we're wanting to put in place so that teachers are able to better support the students. And a lot of this still has to do with instruction. And so, so the first is, several of you have heard me talk a little bit about the model of acceleration of learning versus remediation. So we are working with the New Teacher Project pretty heavily. Actually, the CIPD and EdTech team is meeting right now. They meet with this group every other week, where our next step is actually to look at the scope and sequence pacing guides, look at the curricular guides being provided by each of our content areas, and then realigning them and really pulling out those key concepts so that we can deliver that to teachers so they don't have to do that thinking. Well, I mean, teachers will always think, but they don't have to do that heavy lift because they need to design the instruction. So that model really focuses on the fact that we want to aspire to a certain outcome of learning for students as opposed to fix gaps that may have happened. When you aspire, the gaps get fixed along the way because you have a next step going. And so, I could go into a lot of the detail, and I'm more than happy to have that conversation and show you some of the documents as well. But those are the roadmaps that we are going to provide so that we can make it a clearer pathway for any of that remediation. The other aspect is diagnosing and progress monitoring. So I have great appreciation for leadership who has been supportive of our requests to really look at assessment this year with a focus on use for instruction as opposed to maybe use for compliance or other things. Now, obviously, we know that there are state requirements that we'll be obligated to, et cetera. But for now, what we have been reviewing is our assessment calendar being really minimized to allow teachers and students the time to get into assessment situations where they can really demonstrate where they are now. An example would be, we actually met this afternoon with Curriculum Associates. They are our vendor for K-8 math. And they have a diagnostic that our teachers and students are familiar with called iReady. We talked about a modification of the window so that we can get an earlier diagnostic in, and how to do that faithfully online. And then even the communication and training with families. They had a huge parent piece that we discussed with them around why it is so important that we get an accurate reading on where the kids are, because it will then drive the next instructional step. And so really, we know that we're stepping into a school year where we may have an even wider difference in student learning and knowledge. So it's really critical. Teachers are practitioners in understanding where a student is and where they need to take them next. But we really need to know where they are when they come in. So those are the two things that we've been working on.
Okay, thank you. That was it, Pat.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Mr. Torres, you're up next.
First, thank you for this. This is a difficult scenario. And we're asking our workforce to essentially, in the spring, we turned around on a dime and as best we could created learning environments that we thought would be impactful for children. And I think it's been pointed out at previous meetings, we now have time to be able to plan for some of this, but the uncertainty of things is actually, I think, having to plan for two completely different scenarios, which, just being a regular classroom teacher is hard enough, right? But trying to do, both of these and be able to maneuver through them is asking a lot of our executive leadership team, of our faculty, of our staff, and so I want to begin by thanking you for your hard and thoughtful work in trying to get us to August, I guess. I think so. So I have a couple sort of general questions and some thoughts I wanted to bring out. Helen, you had talked about a number of online programs that we would be looking at in the fall, and some would be sort of semester-long courses, and some would be put in place if and when we can return to face-to-face instruction. Can you tell me what is the programs that we're looking at for the online, the semester-long online courses, and how are we going to support those students?
Sure. So it actually is a program that isn't broken down by semester, or there's no end date. It's essentially our scope and sequences are laid out by units. And the units do run a certain number of weeks, depending on what the topic is. And those are still going to be the units that essentially every teacher, whether you're in an online setting, online model or hybrid model, would be governing their planning. The instructional resources that we're providing, we still have all of the district core adoptions with the added social studies for K-5 that's new for this year. Right. So that means the STEM scopes is still available. The iReady and Ready Classroom for Math is still available, Carnegie Learning for the high school. And all of that is still being utilized. The units of study and balanced literacy. These are all incorporated resources. What we're receiving from this program that I mentioned in this presentation, that is the activities and lessons that are native to an online teaching environment, is something that's been created by ASU, Arizona State University, Prep Digital. I don't want to provide all the details until it's been confirmed and approved, but it's definitely something that you can seek more information on from Dr. Blanco and Chief Jamal. But essentially, they have been operating in an online school environment for 6-12 for a number of years, and they have been piloting K-5. We did receive initially a presentation at a LACO meeting about the sort of offerings that they had. And what really appealed to us about this program is that, unlike some of the other commonly known online systems that we know about, like Acellus or Apex or Alex or other things like that, although Alex is incorporated in this for math, what we saw was a holistic look at what a lesson design is. So like that full project based, here's the activity, here's a reading selection or primary source or whatever goes with it, depending on the subject. Not just here's the task, assignment complete, assignment complete, assignment complete. So we wanted it to be something that was interactive, that still allowed the teacher to have instructional jurisdiction and to have the student have interaction versus just getting on and completing tasks and then sort of having a checklist of assignments be the marker of what they accomplished this year. So we can definitely give you more detail on that if it becomes approved, but that is what we are looking at for online content.
Okay. And so we will have staff assigned to those students to monitor progress as well, I'm assuming.
I believe this is something that Dr. Miller would be able to speak to because I think staffing for either program will, have to take into account HR and UTP considerations. So I don't know if Dr. Miller's still online.
And I may be
Yes,
afraid he is online because he goes in and out on his.
Yes, I do apologize. I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
Okay. Absolutely. Thank you, Helen. So once we've identified what the program is, then we will be looking at working with academics to identify what classes will be offered and then what appropriate credential, and then we'll be filling those positions primarily from our current ranks, and then backwards map that to our remote learning positions, and then trying to fill all the positions, but at the same time trying to be conservative with our FTE.
Okay. Yeah, and just Steve or Dr. Miller, just as I'm sure you're aware, if it's a sort of that sort of independent study model that you're looking at, that they will be virtual learners through the semester, the credentialing requirements are not in place. You need a credential, but you don't need a specific credential for K-12.
Yes, for the independent study model, that credential is not a requirement. For a remote and/or online program that's providing credits for a core class, then the credential would apply.
Okay. All right. We can have a further conversation on that. All right. So another question I have, this came up when we were talking about students, and I think Ms. Bailey brought this up about new kindergartners or new students to our district. I'm going to encourage you to think about, staff to think about having a sort of town hall, perhaps with school communities for supporting your child on a distance learning platform. And I'm going to encourage you also to reach out to our group homes and have their staff log in as well. Because we're going to be asking, this will be perhaps more permanent. I mean, I'm thinking, this may last as long as first semester. So I think that we want to provide as much information for caregivers on how to support the children that they come into contact with every day. So, and I don't know if you've done that or planned that, but I would encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to have, some monthly check-ins with various school site families to be able to sort of continue helping parents and caregivers support the children that they're working with.
So, Mr. Turris, we
yes.
did have a conversation this morning in ELT about how family engagement can work with our community liaisons and how we could design some trainings for parents, exactly what you're talking about, and just have a more active role with using employees that we might not have had time to plan for. And one of the components of Canvas is the parent portal where they can see engagement. And so we'll have to teach families how to be able to access and use that portal. And so regardless of what teacher, if it's an online teacher or a hybrid teacher, they're all going to be working from the Canvas management learning system. So we'll have the same capacity to engage parents and then also monitor student and teacher engagement. So it's one learning management system that's going to have two different pathways on there, but there are some key components that we want all teachers to have, which is the professional development on how to be an online teacher, and then also the parent engagement pieces.
Okay. And we'll probably also want to encourage our PTA to perhaps hold some sessions on how to support children at home. So just a thought. I'm looking at you, Pat. All right. So another thought I wanted to bring up was, I think one of the things in my time on the board is this idea of looking deeper at questions, and that we don't look at necessarily binary choices, like we're open or we're not open, right? And I was thinking about school reopenings and what that's going to look like. And I think one of the things, we're hopeful that it'll happen at some point in the fall. But reopening doesn't necessarily mean everything gets reopened, right? I mean, we may look at elementary school first. We may look at various, just depending on staffing, on attendance, on various criteria. But one of the things I am also going to push for is, and you're going to have to bring Mr. Luce into this conversation. I don't really think the independent study program, which meets students or can meet students one-on-one weekly, that you may want to look at that as being sort of the first school that can reopen in some capacity, because it's not a classroom setting. You're working with kids individually one-on-one, and I think that kind of program may lend itself to reopening earlier than other sort of larger classroom settings. And I just wanted to throw that out there as a thought, but you'd have to get Mr. Luce to chime in on that too. Let's see. I had one other. So let me ask this question as well. This may be a further down the road question, but when we're reopening, when the time comes for schools to reopen, and my understanding is we're essentially going to do like a pod system. I don't know. Is this a appropriate topic for today, or it may be further down the road? I'm looking at you, Pat.
I think we want to save that question.
Okay. Let me save that then.
Yeah.
All right. So last thing I wanted to ask about was our charter school partners, the ones that we have oversight over. I'd asked earlier for some sort of report on how they were doing in the spring. And I'm going to ask also that we have some sort of understanding of what they're doing for the fall. And I think it's appropriate to ask for some depth on what their plans are for their students. And so I look at Dr. McDonald and perhaps with board consent, that we ask our charter school, our authorized charter schools to provide some feedback on what their plans are for the fall.
So not to cut off Dr. McDonald, but we are planning a meeting to meet with all of the charter schools with Mr. Rennie. And I know that you did ask that for that data in the spring, and I apologize for not getting it to you. We did reach out to them, and some of them were reluctant to give us the data because they're still planning. And they did tell us that they went for the charter school loans that were available, and they shared that information. So we were holding off on giving you the report until they gave us additional information, but we're calling them in for a formal meeting. And when I say calling them in, it will be a remote meeting, of course, so we can share what our plans are and expectations in terms of health and safety, and then hear what their plans were. So I know that meeting has been scheduled, and I'll send you the exact date because I don't have it right off the top of my head right now, but I know it's been scheduled.
Okay, thank you. So that's all for me.
Okay. To start first, I want to echo everyone else's comments about the logistical complexity that everybody's jumping over right now. Scott mostly covered, I think, all of the questions that were asked by the public. There were two that I got independently, and I would also like to add a very gentle pushback, because I think Mr. Phelps' characterization wasn't entirely incorrect. But I think based on the feedback I've received from the parent community in the last 10 days, I think one of the biggest concerns right now is the simple lack of definitive answers. And, I've been doing the best that I can to explain, not only what staff is going through and trying to plan, and also how the background picture has been changing rather rapidly in the last couple of weeks. But I would encourage, I don't think the public wants to know our metrics for reopening because they think that we're going to reopen and put kids in danger. I think generally speaking, people trust this district to make the right decision as far as health goes. I mean, that seems to be, sort of the universal response I'm seeing from parents. However, parents have a lot of uncertainty right now with their own work arrangements and their own childcare arrangements and things like that. And the ability to keep tabs on what's happening with the school district is difficult. So that's going to sort of inform some of my comments and observations here. The first one is, so I understand the logistics reasons why we would have to have the all distance all year be an independent model in this design that we have. And I appreciate the fact that staff is going to quite a lot of work to meet that need, because there was a very loud and passionate view in defense of that need. One of the questions that was asked is, well, I'm not certain yet if I would feel comfortable sending my kids back to school at all in the fall. But I could see conditions changing rapidly in the space of a month, and then me deciding in the spring that I would want them to go back. Would it be possible for the distance learning option to be a buy-in on a half-year basis rather than a full-year basis? And staff doesn't have to answer that question right now. It may be something that you need to discuss and talk about the ramifications. But I think if that's a possibility that can be worked out logistically, that that might go a long way to keeping parents who are concerned about the commitment to a full year of distance learning. Because I think obviously the parents want their kids back in school, right? Just like the teachers want to teach the kids in school, the parents want their kids to go back to school. And I think some of them are feeling like if they commit to a full year, they're doing their child a disservice if the pandemic blows away over a Christmas vacation. Now, I don't want to be the doomsayer, but I don't think that's going to happen. But if it's possible to have that sort of flexibility in the model, that's something the staff may want to consider and bring back to the board at the end of the month or before school starts. So that was one thing. Two, I want to echo some of Michelle's comments, particularly about the disadvantaged community. I think there's definitely an argument to be made that many of our special education students, especially the medically fragile kids, have a level of need that's difficult for the district to address in remote learning. So I'm going to sort of latch on to what Larry said and say that when it comes to prioritizing what we open and when we open it, I think we need to start first and foremost with PALS, the special ed kids, and the people whose parents are first responders. I know the board was particularly struck by the letter from the two doctors that we received back. It seems like 1,000 years ago now, where they said, we're both doctors and we haven't seen our son in 3 months because we had to send him to go live with his grandparents because we can't watch him during the day, or we're both on shift. So I hope that we take that sort of approach to reopening and prioritizing the educational needs of the most needy students first, and that may mean that we open in person on one school site for special day classes, and to socially distance them, it's a lot more complicated of a plan. So I did want to throw that out there as well. And I wanted to make an offer to Helen in the academics department. I have in my time made more than one here's how to do this thing with a piece of software video, and I've got multiple cameras and multiple computers. So if you and TJ need someone to be the parent guinea pig for Canvas and work up a FAQ and here's how you find this and here's where you click and make little instructional videos, I'm happy to help with that. And also for TJ, if you need someone on the programming side of things to help build your middleware application between Canvas and Aries, I'm certain that some of the folks around here, I can probably dragoon them into offering some coding hours if that helps the district out. So both of those things I wanted to add in there. I do think the public definitely prefers any ironclad answer to ongoing really, really nebulous plans. So I'm happy to make a decision today. I certainly support giving the superintendent the authority to open the schools in remote. I think that's just based upon what I know of the fellow board members. I think we're all in agreement that staff's recommendation for health and safety reasons is reasonable. But I would also suggest that one of the things that we consider is before the July meeting, Brian, you might want to publish sort of a decision point calendar so parents can. I think the uncertainty is one thing that's making people reluctant to be happy about the plans. And if we say, we're gonna make a decision on September 15th, on October 30th, and on the first day of class after Thanksgiving, or whatever the schedule is, then people know that they can put that in their calendar and bookmark and look for the superintendent's message to see if school's going to open in 2 weeks or not. Whereas if we just say we're going to open when the metrics say we will, I know from my own personal experience that thinking to yourself, well, what all of a sudden when things we're choosing hybrid, but the kids are going online, but then if the district decides to reopen schools on September 20th and we have to report to the site the next week, do we need to deal with transportation? And I'm thinking about this as a parent, and I know that a lot of these questions are just minor annoyances for me, but they're real logistical problems for some of the other parents in the district. So I would encourage Brian, when he comes back at the end of the month, to have sort of a framework for that, so that it doesn't need to be metrics. You don't need to like have set percentages or anything like that, but it's sort of a planning and announcement framework so that parents know, at the very least, in this time, the time box of the next 3 weeks, I can plan out my calendar. I know that we're not going back in these 3 weeks. And if this decision is made, I know it's going to happen on this date. So I don't have to worry about that problem for another month. And I think that will go a long way to reducing anxiety amongst our parent community. And that goes across the board, even for some of our disadvantaged parents and our advantaged parents as well. So I would encourage that. So those are my main observations. I do think that we are going to have, if we don't have a mid-year option for switching back from distance learning to hybrid, I think that we might have a logistical problem, in that we might lose some parents, or we might get a lot of parents asking for, like Dr. Blanco said, for the exception to the rule when things change, so that they can go to whatever model they then feel comfortable with. One of the things that my read of the data tells me that I think it's pretty unlikely that schools will be in session at all this fall. And that's not a decision on ours. I think that's just the way the county health recommendations are going to boil down. So that being the case, I would go so far as to say support that we go with a hybrid model online all the way through to December, and then decide again then. But I will go with whatever the board wants to do in regards to our decision today. So I'll just throw that back to Brian to see if he has any comments, and then I think we can go ahead and vote on this resolution. So Dr. McDonald.
Well, I want to thank the board for all the thoughtful comments and all of the suggestions. They're duly noted, and we will make whatever adjustments necessary so that parents are properly informed and can make informed decisions. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you. And again, thanks to our amazing team. Again, they've been working hard since late February, early March, nonstop, really. Typically in the summer around this time, we'd all take a break, but obviously we have to keep working so that we offer the best program for our kids when they return on August the 17th. So thanks to the team and thanks to the board. Thank you for your support over all these months. It means a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. All right, so we do have an action item on this item. Do I have a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation? Michelle is, oh, wait, is that a question or a?
I want to make a motion, but I want to read it out so that everyone is clear.
Okay.
I'd like to move that the Board of Education approve the opening of the 2021 school year in a remote learning setting through distance learning, with the flexibility to operate a full in-person or hybrid model when health and safety conditions permit.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Do we have any other board conversation?
I just want to say, Brian and staff, because we didn't get a second round, that I would support a massive tutoring effort, and I'd be happy to volunteer, because the online is difficult. Yeah. And families may be comfortable with chasers or other tutors. I know there's different tutoring groups in the community. Even meeting with masks. I've tutored people recently with my mask on. So I saw people offering their services to the staff, Pat and I forget who else. So I'm happy to put that out there. I think that if there's people struggling, there's a question about people struggling, then You're going to have to actually get people to them.
Yeah.
Sorry to throw that in there, but obviously I don't think that we have any choice but to approve this. As I said earlier, if all of the employees in the region and the unknown, the fear level is really high with the unknown. So I hope that the community transmission will go down, and either Larry's idea or someone else's idea for showing how a school could reopen. Is Pat, right? So whatever school you reopen first, whatever program, right? I hope that people can see that and can be successful, and little by little.
All right. Any other comments, or are we ready to go for a vote? All right. Sounds like we're ready for the roll.
Michelle Richardson Bailey,
Yes.
Lawrence Torres,
Yes.
Elizabeth Pomeroy, Scott
Yes, if it's me.
Patrick Alien,
Yes.
Elizabeth Pomeroy.
Oh.
This one is 401.
Oh, wait, I see her.
Yeah.
And she's unmuted too.
Elizabeth
Uh-oh.
Pomeroy,
Elizabeth, you want to vote in chat? Just type yes or no.
Uh-oh, fiber connection is.
Yeah.
On the fritz.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to come through. Okay, but we have 4 votes.
401.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. I will follow up with the superintendent. A question, Larry, Dr. Blanco, would you mind if Mr. Torres sat in on that meeting with the charters if he's available?
I think that will be, I'm checking on the meeting. I believe it's next week, but I'll get you the exact time and date.
Okay, we'll bounce it to Larry. Larry, I'll deputize you as the board charter task force of one if you're.
No, I would appreciate that.
All right, and
again, if I can say, it's not that I think they're doing anything nefarious or anything like that, but it's part of our oversight duties that we want to make sure,
Yes, I concur. And I will also work up. I had started on a sort of formal resolution. We talked at the last meeting about having some version of emergency powers for Brian should the conditions warrant. It seemed to me like the conditions warrant. We have sort of the board consensus on the start, and I'll work with Brian to bring forward something in July at the July meeting that sort of formalizes some of the questions that the public have asked in a way that I think can make sure everybody's comfortable with what the plan is. If that's good with you, Brian? Okay.
Yes.
That being that, I think we are adjourned. Everybody made it in time for dinner. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Everybody.